Welcome to Trulyfit.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Trulyfit Podcast. Beck, thanks for joining us again. Before we get into the questions and conversations today, I'm going to go over a little bit about what is going to be on the Trulyfit Podcast for April. We have a lot of really great guests. We've already recorded a podcast. Today is April 1st, April Fool's Day. I'm not doing any Fool's type jokes. None of this conversation is tomfoolery, just to let you know. I don't partake in April Fool's, but we just released a podcast on the gut-brain axis and gut microbiome, probiotics, prebiotics, postbiotics, psychobiotics, which I didn't even know existed, with Dr. Noel Patno. That was released today on April 1st. Upcoming the following week will be a podcast with Corey Sterling. He is a lawyer who specifically deals with health and fitness industry businesses. He's been on before. He's a wealth of information. So we're going to go over what we discussed last time, in addition to some new things that came up in my mind that are great questions for Corey to kind of pass on to my audience. Who else do we have on? Dr. Blair Steele. We're going to be talking about parenting and mental health. She is a PhD therapist. And then Dr. Chris Swart, who's been on 2 or 3 times on the podcast. He has his PhD in a few different things, I think. He's studied in some nutrition-related things and then like exercise physiology. And he's, again, a wealth of knowledge in the fitness industry and the nutrition industry. But we're going to be talking about addiction recovery. He actually struggles with this, so he's going to talk about his struggles and just random questions that I have for him about addiction recovery, So that is what's going on for the April podcast in Trulyfit. But let's jump into today. First topic here, Becca, I'll have you answer this. What do you feel about gatekeeping in the industry? It's a huge issue that I find in my industry, in fitness, in nutrition as well. You'll see people say, well, if you don't have these credentials, you shouldn't talk about this. And what they end up doing is they spend all of their time, or majority of their time, putting down others who are putting out information instead of just trying to put out good information on their own. And I feel like it takes up too much of their content. But what do you feel about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I hate this. I feel like these people are the equivalent to like ambulance chasers, where you need to be creating value and putting value out there. I think if you see someone who is giving out information that is dangerous, maybe you can refute that, but that shouldn't be more than 10% of your time, right? 90% of the time you should be giving out valuable information. I think that a lot of people have this scarcity mentality where they think, if Steve is saying the sky is blue and I know the sky is white, then, we can't both be white. We can't both be right. But actually we can, right? Because some days the sky is blue, some days the sky is white. And people think that, in order for me to grow an audience, in order for me to get more popular, you need to lose popularity. And that's just not true, right? Because the majority of people who are following people in the fitness space or the nutrition space or really, any genre for that matter, they follow more than one person, right? You're going to get your information from a wide variety of people, and then you sort of pick and choose what works for your lifestyle. So, I also think in both of our industries, everything is so nuanced and has to be so personalized, right? So if you gave me 10 minutes, I could find you a peer-reviewed journal article that says oatmeal causes diabetes. And then if you give me 10 more minutes, I could find an article from another very, widely recognized journal that says the opposite, that says oatmeal is actually great for you. The fiber, it's going to prevent diabetes, right? And all of this is nuanced because it depends on what are you eating with the oatmeal? How much oatmeal are you eating? Are you exercising after the oatmeal, right? Like there's all of these little things. And so I think you can go back and forth like this all day. You can literally refute anything, right? Like, well, like water's good for you. Well, not all water's good for you. And this person said water. So it's just like, it's exhausting. And I think, I see this all the time. And I think it's catty. I think it's childish. And I think it's a reflection that the people who are doing it don't have enough to offer, don't have enough to put out there.
Yeah, I don't mind it as that was well said, but I don't mind it as like an initial power move if it's backed up by facts and reasoning. If you're like, hey, I know this person said this. These are my credentials. This is what I've learned. And then you unpack scientifically, rationally, reasonably, whatever, about what exactly, how you think that topic should be discussed if that person is misrepresenting said study or misrepresenting whatever that is in the health and nutrition world. So I don't necessarily mind that. So I don't think like throwing your credentials out there is just this like, oh, you can't do that, or you can't tell anyone else. But I do, where I see the problem is that most people are talking past each other. And what would be better is if they just did what we did, invited them on for a long form conversation to say, hey, can we unpack this thoroughly? Because I know that I've done it. Like I've read somebody's post really quickly, or their, whatever, their tweet or their X now, because it's not Twitter anymore. And, I am not necessarily triggered, but I'm upset by something that they said, but I took it out of context, right? I didn't get the context that they were putting it into. Why? Because it's difficult, right? I'm reading it, I'm seeing it through my lens and my experience, and I don't get all the details that maybe they're trying to convey given the study that they researched or whatever it is that they're trying to promote. So there are people who on the internet, this is the only thing they do.
Yeah,
they just
refute. Yeah.
They find clips of people they don't like and they just refute. I don't think that's good. If it's a small part of your business and you're doing it in a thoughtful way where you're actually explaining why something is, dangerous or deleterious to someone's health, and you're going to explain the right way to go about it, I think it's fine. But again, like I said, if you're going to use your credentials as the only reason why you're saying this instead of actually explaining the science and rationale behind it, I don't think that's good.
Yeah. And I think, relying on your credentials only isn't fair, right? Because we all know doctors, we all know PhD scientists who don't stay up to date on the information, right? There's people in my field, there's people in your field who haven't opened up a textbook, right? Or aren't keeping up with the journals. And so they have antiquated information. And, just throwing around like, okay, I got my doctorate 10 years ago. Well, what have you done since? Great. So you studied really hard and that's awesome. You were dedicated. That doesn't mean you know everything. You can't. That doesn't mean you know everything. And I think, there's a way to do it where you can correct and put out the right information, but you don't have to call people out, because I think then it just gets into like, you just want attention. You want this back and forth, right? You want like the conflict creates attention, and it draws people in. And I don't want anything to do with that. I think what you give your energy to, you create more of. So it's like, why would I want to give my energy to this person who's wrong, right? Instead, I'm just going to continue to put out the right information and do what I think is right.
Well, I'll be a contrarian, not that I actually disagree, but the why would I want to do this? The reason they do want to do this is because it's shown to be successful. Because I'm talking about in social media. So people have gotten famous just by doing this. Hey, let me show what this person says and why it's wrong, and I'm going to refute this. So people get the likes and the clicks and the admiration
drama, it's
from doing this.
Right? Yeah.
Drama, it's controversy. So why not? And also, it is a source, as you can imagine, of unlimited content, right? So you don't even have to go out and create your own content. Before you and I have this podcast today, I have to look up subjects that are trending. I have to look up things that I think are worthwhile for us to talk about in the audience. You don't have to do that if you're just refuting people. I just find 5 or 6 people who I think are idiots, and then I play their videos and I find something they say that's idiotic, and boom, there's my content. So it's almost in a bad way. It's an easy way out for people to make content by just, finding things that other people say that are hot topics that they disagree with and then using it against them.
Yeah. Not a fan.
Well, on to the next topic here. I thought this was interesting. And the first thing I thought of was you and what you would say about this when I asked you. So I heard somebody who, I don't want to say I necessarily respect or don't respect, but somebody who is getting very famous in the fitness and nutrition and health industry. And recently he came out with a reel. And the question was, if you got to decide one of these two for you, and I guess you would say for your clientele as somebody who, is a nutritionist, would you pick organic vegetables or organic fruits? Now, you could still eat fruits or vegetables in general, but you can only have one of them in the organic version from now for the rest of your life. Which one would you pick and why?
Easy. Organic vegetables, conventional fruit. And this is for 2 reasons. One is the majority of your diet should be vegetables. It should. You should not be eating equal amounts of vegetables and fruits. And obviously this depends on what kind of fruits you're consuming, right? Berries are higher in fiber and lower in sugar than say bananas. But generally speaking, everyone should be eating more vegetables. So you want the majority of your diet to be organic. The other reason I say this is because a lot of fruits have peels. So think about a banana, an orange, a kiwi, an avocado, right? They have these peels, and the peels can prevent the sprayed pesticides from getting into the fleshy part of the fruit, which we eat. So they can actually be protective. And it's not 100% protection, but it does act as a little bit of a shield. It doesn't always, the pesticides aren't always able to seep through the peel. Whereas vegetables, right? Think about celery, think about cucumber, you're eating the entire vegetable. There's no protection there, right? The broccoli, you're eating it all. And so if those are sprayed with pesticides, spinach, you're going to be consuming all of that. So 100% organic vegetables and then conventional fruit.
A returning, I don't want to say guest because he's never been on the podcast, so I'm sure never will be, but a returning person who we've talked about before disagrees.
Okay.
So Gary Brecka, who I've done a whole podcast on him before, said he would pick organic fruit. And this is his reasoning, is because some fruits, the fruits that he eats mostly, because he doesn't eat things like bananas, because, the people who are crazy about fruits will only eat berries. Right. He says will take in some of their nutrients through their skin. And because of that, he would pick fruits. Now, all of the reasonings that you gave seem much more logical. Number one, you're going to eat more vegetables than fruits. And a lot of fruits do have a casing, so to speak, a skin, which isn't going to allow it. He disagreed with that. What are your thoughts on that?
So he said you can take it in through the skin. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so he said there are fruits. He didn't say the fruits specifically, but I assume he means berries because that's what he eats mostly. Some of the berries will actually take in nutrients through their skin rather than just through the soil. So therefore, if they're sprayed, then they would be taking in those pesticides with the rest of the nutrients in through their skin. I don't exactly know what he means. I don't know how that works mechanistically through the fruit of the skin, but this is what he said.
Yeah, I cannot speak to that. I think it's very similar, right? If you spray a cucumber or you spray a strawberry, both of them don't have thick skins. It's going to absorb into the the flesh of what you're eating. So I disagree with you, Gary. I think we gotta go with the organic vegetables.
Yeah, well, most people do disagree with him these days, although he's become quite the overnight success here. Okay, I need you to pick out two random things for me. You think of anything.
So two things, and this is different from your question to me because you can have one or the other. You can't have both. Okay, So for the rest of your life, the next 50 years, and this is also something you'd recommend to clients if they could only do one thing for their entire lives: running or yoga.
Yoga, no doubt.
Okay.
Yeah, wouldn't even be close. Because it's a generality, there's so many people who have, we're all very biodiverse. So many people who genetically are just not built to run, whether that's, their gait, their Q angle as a female, whether maybe it's not specifically genetic, but it could be, ACL issues they're finding out are genetic. There's so many genetic predispositions on how you're built, wherein running could be harmful for you. Also, just the long-term pounding, the wear and tear is tough on you. So, yoga is much safer for the general person. Again, these are general questions, right? You're not saying, hey, you have to tell Bob, who's 47, who lives in San Diego, what he needs to do. But if this was just for the general population, or even myself, I only got to do one of those two activities. It would be yoga. It's also, you're working a lot more muscle groups in yoga than you are running, right? So running, you're limited on working. You're not doing any pushing. You're not doing any pulling. You're not really doing much rotation. There's a little bit of that transverse movement when you're running left and right, but really it's what we call, you're in sagittal plane. You're just going forward and you're mostly just working your lower body, where yoga can really be a good full body exercises. You're moving through all the major movements that I talk about: push, pull, hinge, lunge, squat, rotate, plank. You're doing all those movements. So for me, that's also a no-brainer. It would be yoga.
You're doing it all. Yeah. So I ask because, and I agree with you about the injury from an injury perspective, right? You're much more likely to, I think, get injured running. But that being said, there's like a very little to no cardio component to yoga, right? Like, are you really getting your heart rate up to where it needs to be cardiovascular wise, and to prevent weight gain and all of these issues we see later on down the road? You often, if you see someone in their 50s who's been running for 20 years, they are fit. If you see someone in their 50s who's been doing yoga, they're not necessarily as fit, right?
Sure. Yeah. No, that you're not wrong in that. A part of the reason is it's twofold. I think it's a little bit of a chicken before the egg thing. People in fitness like to do the things they're good at in fitness. So I have friends who are offensive linemen and defensive linemen in high school, let's say, which are typically bigger people who weigh, in their mid 200s. What they're doing now, lifting wise, is bench press and squat and deadlift. Why? Because they can do more of that, right? They're not great at yoga. Yoga is not for them. They have to hold up their bodies. So they're more likely to go ahead and do that. Whereas there might be women who weigh 120 pounds who are hyper flexible, and they're just more likely to go into yoga. Or even women who are slightly, maybe, if you want to use the term overweight, I don't know if we can even say overweight anymore, but they're not very muscular, but they're very flexible, and they can do yoga. And maybe they're not aggressive by nature. And yoga is not an aggressive lifting like an Olympic lifting or CrossFit is, right? So I do think there's a chicken before the egg where certain types of people will gravitate towards certain things. Who are the people who are usually running? Well, skinny people who are fast. Those are people who are mostly running, right? There's that component. But yeah, there is the other component where obviously if you're running, you have probably a chance to burn more calories. You can run for longer durations of time, and you're going to develop a different look than you will in yoga. But to go back to the initial thing you said, dependent upon how you go about yoga. Yoga is such an umbrella term. There's various different kinds of yoga.
Exactly.
And then if you're not going to even follow a particular form, if you just want to take the movements of yoga and do them in your own way, a really fast flow way, and challenge yourself, you can make it very, very difficult.
You could get your heart rate up. Yeah. Okay. Good to know.
Moving on, speaking of that, the different body types and health. Healthy at any size is a term that has been floating around our industry for a while now. I think at one point was something we all thought was a positive term, healthy at any size, meaning let's not focus so much on vanity, and everyone can be involved in these health and fitness and nutrition game. But now it sort of took what I consider like a public relations political tactic where it's being used by everyone in ways where it doesn't make sense. We can't be healthy at 500 pounds. We can't be that healthy if your BMI is over 45. We have the statistics now. So what do you think about this term? How do we maybe move away from this, or do you disagree with me and think this term is okay?
No, I agree with you on this. And the idea that we can be 100, 150, 200 pounds overweight and still be healthy is insane. Right. I love the idea of removing the stigma, but we still have to empower people to say, like, you can strive for health at any size. And that doesn't mean that you don't love your body. Right. So you can love yourself, you can love your body, but want to make improvements. So I love my home. Right. A couple of years ago, we bought our dream home. It's wonderful. Every weekend, we're doing things to improve our home. Every single weekend, right? We're doing things and we love it, but we still want to improve it and make it better. And I think we have to capture that mentality that you can love yourself and, want to feel your best. Obesity, it's complex. And I know we'll get into this later on in the podcast too. It's a very complex condition. And there are a lot of different causes, but there is a huge lifestyle component. And it doesn't mean it's your fault, but we can still take some accountability for the choices that we do have that may be contributing to it. And I think healthy at every size makes people complacent. It makes people say, oh, it's healthy to be, 5'4" and 225 pounds. No, it's not, and again, you need to work with a professional. We need to look at your biomarkers. It's more than just BMI and weight. But yeah, healthy at every size to me is sort of just, I think it was created by the food industry, right? To just keep people eating and let them know like they don't have to make changes. When you really need to like take your health into your own hands and advocate for yourself and make the changes necessary to feel your best.
Yeah, well said. And I think it was stolen, for lack of a better term, by a small minority of people who are pushing an agenda and, bunk science, certainly, but just bad messaging. Meaning, as I stated when I first introduced this, I do think there was a really positive belief system and push behind this when it started out. Hey, you can be a little bit heavier and you can be, not the ideal body type, but still be healthy, right? We need to look at things like you just talked about, your labs and biomarkers. And there are some people who might be what we consider, not the fitness model-esque body type that are still very, very healthy. We can't just strive for vanity. But then it got sort of, commandeered by the, like a small minority of people who are, again, 100, 150, 200, 300 pounds overweight, extremely obese, who say, nope, you could actually be healthy at any size. I mean this literally, not figuratively, and don't worry about what anyone else says. And that's bad messaging, both scientifically. I know there's an empathy component to this, like we feel bad, but we have to be rational sometimes, right? We have to put that empathy side of the brain down and say, what's rational here? If I really want to help this person, I have to explain to them that no, you actually can't be healthy at any size. There we have the metrics to show that by losing weight, this is not just a few things, right? People go, oh, obesity, which we'll talk more about. This is everything from, metabolic issues to heart disease to,
cancer.
kidney,
Absolutely raises
thyroid,
your risk of cancer. Yeah.
liver disease, cancer, right? All of these things are potentially going to be more prevalent in somebody who is above a certain BMI or a certain weight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's gotten to a point where healthcare professionals can't even speak to their patients about it, right? Because like you said, you're like, am I allowed to say overweight? We don't know what's PC anymore. And, I think the idea behind it is good. We do want to remove the stigma. And we want to be able to tell people like, you have a disease. Obesity is a disease. Similar to like you have diabetes. Here are the things that, maybe you've done over the last 20 years that have contributed to that. Here's how we can get the ball rolling and get you in a better position, right? Like your lifestyle choices also contribute to other diseases. So let's treat it like any other disease. But you wouldn't say like diabetes, you're super healthy, right? It's so bizarre to me that with all of these other conditions, it's like something you'd like to eradicate. And now like there are people defending obesity. It needs to be really made clear that it's dangerous. Like you said, it increases your risk of the top killers, heart disease, cancer, kidney disease, all of these things. So the healthy at every size movement has gotten to a point where it doesn't make sense anymore. I think it's dangerous.
Agreed. It's a bit of a gaslighting term. And that segues perfectly into our next topic, which is Oprah, who was recently promoting weight loss drugs. And she said something to the extent on her long form interview. I think she stepped down from the board. She was on the board of Weight Watchers.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, listen, you have obesity. It's a disease. The doctor who she was speaking with was like, yeah, it's no different than asthma, right? This is just something you have. What do you think about the way she phrased that?
We could have an entire podcast on this. This is like such a great topic. It's such a great question. As I touched on before, obesity is complex. So when I was in grad school for nutrition, we had entire concentrations on obesity. So not just one class, like multiple classes, right, that are semester long to get into all the nuanced information. So I think there are multiple causes, right? There is an environmental factor. And by that, I mean like environmental toxins, right? Those could be things you're breathing in, that could be air pollution, and they can act as hormone disruptors, right? Endocrine disruptors that are going to disrupt your hormones, making, throwing off your insulin, throwing off some of your hunger hormones, and actually, like getting the ball rolling and causing diabetes. So there's environmental factors. There are genetic factors, right? There are a lot of populations that gain weight in a different way. So if you look at a lot of Asian populations, a lot of people in those cultures are getting diabetes, but they're normal weight. But it doesn't matter because they've been, they've been eating poorly, or maybe been, eating too many carbohydrates for all this time. I know that my best friend is Filipino. She could eat you under the table, Steve, right? Like she just consumes, can eat very well and is still 90 pounds and will never gain weight. So there is a part that's genetic, right? Some people are more likely to carry more weight, and the way that weight is distributed on our body is also genetic, right? It's a lot more dangerous to carry weight in your midsection than it is like in your legs, say, right? And that's also genetic. So there are these components where, like any other disease, it's outside of your control. But again, there are lifestyle factors. And I think with obesity compared to something like asthma or cancer, the lifestyle factors are more important, right? We know that diet and exercise and even sleep and stress really can contribute to weight gain. And I think we have to empower people to, make those changes and not just feel like this happened to me, right? When you say this happened to you, it's genetic, you feel like there's nothing I can do. And there are things that people can do. But that being said, as a nutritionist, I work with people who take Ozempic, who take some other similar drugs. And I think there is a space for them. I think that if you're taking these drugs in conjunction with working with a trainer, working with a nutritionist, what it's going to do is it's going to curb your hunger hormones. It's going to curb your cravings, and then you're able to make better decisions and you're able to create those good habits. For some people, they're so overwhelmed in the same way that someone who's prone to being like a gambling addict, right? Your reward pathways in your brain are thrown off. So for some people, food does that for them. Your reward pathways are thrown off that you can't make logical decisions. You're going to eat poorly. And so
part of the reason they're thrown off, though, is because of the food types that they're choosing, right? So you're talking about, there's companies like Nabisco who have whole science departments who are just trying to get the right flavor profile and the right snap on their cookie to get you addicted. So unless people start making better choices and make the first change, they're going to probably fall back down the rabbit hole of obesity.
For sure. But for some people, I think they're more prone to it, right? In the way that you and I could go to Vegas and I could spend 24 hours gambling and feel fine, and maybe you would be more addicted to it. Like, I think that there is a genetic component to addiction. I do believe that. But I don't believe that it's binary, right? It's not all or nothing. It's maybe your reward pathways work in a slightly different way than mine do, and your brain releases more dopamine. That doesn't mean it can't be overcome. Right. So, with the Ozempic, I will say it can be helpful when you do it the right way. And when you're committed to, while I'm on this drug, I'm also going to be working really hard to change these habits and, make better lifestyle choices. So when I'm off it, I can continue to work towards a long-term solution, because you really can't be on it long-term. And they haven't yet established how long you should be on it. Right. If you talk to your doctor, they'll say, oh, it's fine. The studies are too new. It can cause gastroparesis and pancreatic cancer and thyroid cancer and all of these issues. So I tell my clients, the shorter the better. If you can be on it for 3 months, great. If you have to be on it for 6 months, fine. But you really don't want to be on it longer than that.
Yeah, and I would argue most drugs, not all, but most drugs you don't want to be on for an infinite amount of time, right? Working with the proper professionals to say, hey, how do I wean off this at some point? Like, my goal is to not take this drug anymore. Is that a possibility? Something like blood pressure drugs, that's a different story, right? You're talking about strokes that you're going to have to be, but something like a cholesterol medication, where you're not going to die instantly if you stop taking your cholesterol medication, right? There's ways to wean off. I've gotten my clients to stop taking their cholesterol medication, right, over time. So I do think there needs to be a plan in place to say, hey, I'm going to do all the right things in the back end lifestyle wise to eventually wean off of these drugs. These are just catalysts to get me going. But I guess my problem is I'm going to maybe talk through two sides of my mouth because I'm usually very more science-based, but I'm going to be a little hippy-dippy here. I think we're just pathologizing and medicalizing this stuff a little bit too much. It's really not that difficult. I watched this show called Alone. It's I'm so addicted to it. It's these people they send onto like these islands in Vancouver, right? And they have
You
to
would
survive.
love that.
Oh, yeah. For as many days as they can.
It's like
Right?
Bear Grylls.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
like Bear Grylls. It's like Bear Grylls
Yeah.
in real life, but there's a competition. So there'll be 4 people on various points of the island, and whoever doesn't give up wins $500,000. You have no idea how long the other people are staying on the island, though.
Yeah.
It's one of those things,
100%.
right? So they all lose a ton of weight. Why? Because it's so fucking hard to get food. So like they'll catch a rabbit and they'll break down crying as if their first child was just born, right? Because that's like food now for them for a week and they're so excited. They all lose a ton of weight. I'll get to the point here. Why? Because they're moving around all day because they don't have a lot of food. So we know the science behind this. Like this is a lifestyle thing. Losing weight ultimately is a lifestyle thing. If you're going to move around a lot and if you're not going to have a lot of calories, you're going to lose weight. Now, I'm not telling you that's the healthiest way to go about it and that you should go onto an island in Vancouver and walk around all day and worry about bears eating you and catch one rabbit. But what I'm saying is, if you look at that from just a high level perspective, moving around a lot and eating less, we're going to lose more weight. And the more we pathologize and medicalize this, the more people think they can rely upon drugs and the less they're going to change their lifestyle.
I get it. Yeah, it makes it feel like it's out of their control. I will say this. It is a little bit more complicated than calories in, calories out, right? So if that were true, then no one would lose weight on a keto diet, because a keto diet is high in calories. You're having a lot of fat, you're having a lot of protein. Carbs are lower in calories naturally, right? So it is more complicated. And the reason why the keto diet works is because it works on your hormones. It's balancing your blood sugar. And so, very similar, if you've ever met someone with type 2 diabetes and they aren't able to produce insulin, they can eat 10,000 calories a day and never gain a pound, right? So like it does have to do with your hormones, and there are things in our environment that can control our hormones, but it's a small piece of it. Like you said, your choices and your ability to move your body and eat well really, really matter. But I want to go back to what you said about the show and how the people who win, it's about their mindset, right? It's about who doesn't give up, basically. So I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I'll circle back. I saw an interview with Jay-Z once. And so he grew up, I don't know, either in the Bronx or Queens, and, like is very poverty stricken, right? It wasn't a good situation, but he was able to go into Manhattan and see these skyscrapers, right? And see like, oh, there are people with tons of money. Like this is, so when he was able to like open up his perspective and see just, a couple subway stops away, people are making tons and tons of money. I can do that too. Then he went back, did his thing. I think he sold drugs. So like, I'm not promoting that, but he was able to like get himself out, and, now he's probably one of the richest people in the world. I think for a lot of people, if your parents are overweight, if your grandparents are overweight, and you're living in sort of like middle America, and all you see, if everyone you know is overweight, you're going to think, I have no choice. This is just going to happen to me. I'm going to be overweight. So I think it's your mindset too, right? It's like switching your mindset to think I can do this.
Yeah, that's well said. I've had a BC medicine specialist on, who was Dr. Prologo, who's also interventional radiologist, and he does a procedure in which basically through interventional radiology they put basically like a catheter-esque thing through you into your stomach and singe the hunger nerve, so that you're less hungry, right? So this is somebody who specializes in obesity. Yeah. This is somebody who specializes in obesity, knows a lot about it, but he still thinks that there's, obviously a mental and physiological component to this, right? So that there's hunger cues and hunger nerves, and it's harder for some people, right? We're also bio and psycho diverse to get over this than others. And I in no way mean to, minimalize the difficulty of this by just saying, hey, move more and eat less. But what I'm saying is, if we don't admit that this is mostly lifestyle, and I want to say we have to admit that this is mostly lifestyle, that you can just change your lifestyle in most cases to lose weight, doing all the proper things, then all we're going to do is pour more money into research, pathologize this. Like this is this problem we can't figure out. Oh, this is so intricate. How do we get people to lower obesity rates? It's like, well, this is mostly just a cultural problem. Also, because we look at other cultures who don't have this problem,
indigenous cultures don't have diabetes. Like
they don't have the access to food. No. right? And it's like, well, that's not because of their biodiversity as far as like uh, their insulin levels are more likely to raise, which is like the thing people would research. I feel like we found out, oh, there's some tribe we found and everyone's in really good shape. There'd be some fucking scientists come out and be like, oh, we need to do some research on maybe their gut microbiome because maybe that's the reason. It's like, no, because
they're 14 hours a day. Yeah.
Yeah, they're climbing they're climbing the fucking Himalayas, shooting rabbits like that. This is the reason why they're way less, right? Not because they have a different gut microbiome. So I just think we go so deep into the research because let's take that back. Who's profiting from that, right? When you make this a disease, that's where all the money comes into researching things. We don't get people like me and you who can just work with clients. It gets bumped up the ladder, the doctors to give out medications.
Yeah. But I think you said it's a cultural thing, and I agree with that. And I don't think this is the only case, right? I think similarly, if you look at like anxiety or depression, right? So do anti-anxiety drugs help? Yes. Like, do some people need it? Yes, for short amounts of times. But at the same time, should you be working with a psychologist or a therapist to figure out why you're depressed, right? Like they're like, oh, it's a chemical imbalance, but how did you get there, right? What are your lifestyle factors that are contributing to this? And how
also there's always, sorry to interrupt, there's always so many studies on the people who have an issue and not enough studies on the people who don't, right? Can we just reach out to all the people who tell you openly that they have no anxiety? Hey, I have no anxiety whatsoever. What is that person doing, right? Can we look at them? We don't want to do that because what we do is we say, oh, that they're just lucky. This is just a roll of the dice.
Lucky. Oh, they got.
In a sense, it is. If you don't believe in this, is like a free will conversation, right? I don't believe in free will. It's sort of another story. So, like, because I don't believe in free will, what I mean is every decision I've ever made is based off the fact that I was born. I didn't choose that I was born. I didn't choose where I was born. I didn't choose where my mother fed me and how many times she fed me. And every decision I've ever made comes from the initial decisions that I didn't make, right? That's all interconnected. It's all one web that's woven together. So yeah, I have choice in the moment, but those choices are all affected by prior decisions that had nothing to do with me. So that's what I mean by free will. That's a whole nother conversation, but
yeah, you're into the Marvel universe here.
but I guess why I say that is because, I am lucky in a sense for certain things. You're lucky. People are lucky. But they are doing things that allow them to have whatever those things are, whether, again, free will or not, they'll allow them to not have anxiety. And we need to study those people more than studying all the people who have anxiety.
Of course. Yeah. And, on that note, there's a ton of research that says exercise is just as good as any antidepressant pill. Like they literally have done, double-blind placebo-controlled studies, and exercise and the right diet, right? There's a whole field now, and I know we're going off on a tangent. There's a whole field now called nutritional psychiatry, where a psychiatrist comes in and says, oh, well, like you're low on B vitamins, right? Maybe your body isn't able to methylate, or maybe you haven't had any omega-3s and all these things. And so like going back, I think regardless of what the condition is, there are lifestyle factors that can improve it. And specifically for obesity, it's, I don't want to give it a specific percentage, but it's a large chunk of the pie that is lifestyle. And we need to start empowering people rather than saying, oh, it's outside of our control. But like, going back to your initial question, Oprah talked about asthma and cancer. I think there are huge lifestyle components to that. And I know that I'll like take some hate for that, right? And
of course there are.
I'm not saying if you got cancer, you deserved it, but your diet, your stress level, your exercise, how well you're sleeping, that all plays a role in your immune system and your body's ability to fight that. Similarly with asthma, stress, and then they found that trauma can like really, and not that you can avoid trauma, but you can.
Well, and environmental.
Yeah, exactly. And environmental. So like, what are you around? What are you exposing yourself to? Are you using scented candles? Like what does your air conditioner unit look like? So there are things that you can do. And so I think there's a way, like, and this ties into the earlier topic of healthy at every size. There's a way to say, hey, this isn't your fault. This happened, but there are things you can do to change it and improve it.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. And I do agree with most of that. I guess the small difference would be a lot of the environmental things are so hard to get away from and change. Not that you can't, but they're really difficult.
But I
Uh,
think knowing that they exist and being aware of them, so you can minimize them. I get it. If you live in New York City, you can't control the pollution, but can you control the air filters you have in your house? Can you, if you know there's like a better time to be outside if you do have asthma, like there, I think we still need to acknowledge them, you know?
Totally. Um, but I do think she, in that case, was almost saying the opposite. So you and I
Yeah.
agree that these things, asthma, cancer, obesity, a lot of these diseases, there are some components that are environmental and that are lifestyle related that add to this. What I think she was saying is all of these are diseases in which you have
No
no say
control.
in what goes on. You are
Yeah.
just born with it. It just happens to you, right? You have cancer. You didn't obtain cancer by anything that you've done, even though
Mm,
you went into a tanning booth for the last 12 years, 2 times a day. The skin cancer was just bad luck.
yeah.
So I think there is that component wherein I
Yeah.
agree with you, but I think Oprah wasn't saying that there are lifestyle things that have to do with cancer.
No.
There are no lifestyle things. I think that's what she was saying.
Yeah. I think this goes back to something that we've talked about on previous podcasts, that in this field, there tends to be a pendulum, right? Where you're either like healthy at every size or maybe you're anorexic, right? And it doesn't have to be that way. So I think, you know, Oprah's intentions, I'm guessing here, but I believe her intentions is to take some of the shame away, right? Shame is like a really negative emotion, and shame is probably going to make people feel paralyzed and not do anything. So to remove the shame, to say, hey, take this medication, but and then this is something that happened to you, take this medication and it will help. But I think there also needs to be, like, again, a way of having accountability. Like, let's remove the shame to say this isn't 100% your fault, but we have to empower people. Like, it can't be all or nothing. It can't be this binary. We have to find a middle ground where we're educating people in an effective way, and then also, empathizing them, but also encouraging them to make the changes they need for long-term results. Because what I've found is that clients are basically cycling on and off these drugs, like as you would steroids, which you shouldn't be doing. So they'll take it for 6 months, they'll lose the weight, they'll gain it back, they'll go back on it, and they're not safe. They're not safe enough to do that. That's not the idea. The idea is to go on it, make the changes, get the support team in place so that you don't have to take the medication anymore.
Yeah, and I know we're beating this subject to death, but I do think it's important to say in certain cases, we need to actually break down what the medication does and if it's even a possibility that this is a catalyst or if it's something you're relying upon. So, for example, if you're somebody, and I'm just making this up, who just says, hey, I have such low energy. Like, I don't know what's going on. I have really, really low energy. I can't do anything. It's hard for me. I feel like I haven't rested. I go to sleep. I'm in bed for 8 hours. I don't know if I'm getting bad sleep, whatever. And they find a way to get you a little bit more energy, whatever. Whether it's maybe it's caffeine, maybe it's some other sort of drug that they give you, Provigil, New Vigil. That's a sleep work shift disorder, right? And now you're able to do a bunch of other things that you couldn't otherwise do. You can fit more into your day. You can exercise and work out. Maybe they eventually say, hey, we're going to try to wean you off this little by little, or this is just so great for your life, we have to leave this as an intervention, a long-term intervention. We believe that the positives outweigh the negatives. The problem is with something like Ozempic is because you are not hungry, right? Because the purpose of this is to make you not hungry. That's not a way to stave off hunger pangs, because when you're off of this, those hunger pangs are going to come back, right? You're not developing good habits. The good habits are, like, let me learn about foods. Let me eat the proper foods and the proper nutrients. Let me not think that hunger pangs are bad. Let me just eat when I'm hungry, like normal people do, but I'm going to have better food choices. But if you're relying upon the drug, then you're not making the proper, mindset switch to say, how do I learn more about food? How do I put the proper foods into my body?
Yeah. Yeah. And 60% of people regain weight on Ozempic. I just wrote an article. So I looked up the stats. 60% of people, when they get off the drugs, they regain all that weight back. And so it's like, what is that 30% doing, and how can we get everyone else to fall into that camp? I imagine that they are working with professionals like you and I to really to change their habits.
I'm going to read a quote here, and then I'm going to tell you who it's from. It's surprising, given the quote. I almost don't believe it. Your brain is likely to skip over information that feels like common sense and hunt for the novel, extreme approaches that you've convinced yourself are more likely to lead to the desired outcome. The antidote to wellness starts with shifting what you think it takes to succeed. Behavioral change. The foundation of improving your health or any skill is rooted in a simple concept: make it hard to fail. Pretty well said. I don't think anyone disagrees with this. It was Arnold Schwarzenegger, who you don't think is super well-spoken and insightful, but
very eloquent for Arnold. Yeah. I'm impressed.
He might have had a writer put that out for him, but I thought it was really insightful, and especially the end of it, right? Behavioral change, the foundation of improving your health or any other skill is rooted in one simple concept: make it hard to fail. What do you think about that? Do we not do enough with our clients in the people in the health and fitness industry to just make it hard to fail?
Yeah. So, first to answer that question, I think we have an uphill battle because of these built environments, right? Like the environment that we live in sets you up to fail. We have DoorDash and Uber Eats and Netflix and Disney Plus, right? Like our environments are setting us up to sit at our computers, sit at our TVs all day, sit in our cars, and then overconsume processed foods. So, when everything around you is working against you, you need to work extra hard. But I love the idea of making it hard to fail. I have a degree in neuroscience, shameless plug here. I work a lot with habits and really, focusing on behavior change with clients. I have a course called Happy Healthy Habits, helping people hack their habits and change their lives. I'm a big fan of, behavior change and really diving into effectively create good habits. So one of the most important things here is mindset. And I think like getting your emotions involved, right? So he talks about like shifting what you think it takes to succeed. And I see this a lot with clients where if you are, if you're starting out and you say, I really want to become a runner, like I want to run. And then you go for a run and every minute you're like, gosh, I hate running. This is horrible. This is horrible. You're not going to get anywhere. So dopamine actually helps to wire in new behaviors, helps to wire in a habit. That's why things like gambling and all of these addictive behaviors, they involve dopamine, right? Because it makes it easier for you to repeat that behavior in the future. And so I think changing your mindset around it is one of the best ways I've seen for clients. The other part of that is I think it's important to set up your environment in a really effective way. And so, if you're trying to lose weight, it's not a solo sport. It has to be a team sport, right? And you've seen this, like CrossFit is so effective, not because the workout is the world's best workout. It's because you create this community and you create this team and you have these people to hold you accountable and say like, hey, why didn't you show up yesterday? Right. And so I think that type of environment too also makes it really hard for you to fail. So with clients, I work on emotions, I work on environment. The other thing I work on is like talking about eyesight. So this is one of the simplest things, but it's estimated that we think 80,000 thoughts per day. 80,000 thoughts per day is like the average, right? And with a toddler running around, sometimes your brain is in a million different places. So even if you have really good intentions, you can just forget that you want to make something a habit, right? Like if you want to start having smoothies in the morning, you get up, you get going, and then you're like, it's 9:00. You're like, shit, I forgot my smoothie. So having some type of eyesight cue is really important. I say like, leave your blender in the middle of the counter, have all the ingredients out. Like you need something to remind you, like you need to go out of your way to set yourself up not to fail, because our default is ease, right? Our default is the easiest possible thing we can do. We've evolved in a way where our bodies want to use the least amount of calories as possible, right? Because our ancestors never knew when there was going to be famine or other really stressful circumstances. So it's super important. And I think we don't give ourselves enough credit because people will try to do something and then maybe, 3 days in they forget and then they just throw in the towel, where it's like, you really have to work with a professional and put all these guards in place to set it up so that you can't allow yourself to fail.
Yeah, that was well put, especially concerning the habits. Make it hard to fail is important, I think, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But before I do that, I think it's impossible to not fail. at some point. So I do think you also have to make
But
it.
it's what do you consider failure, right? Because if you don't give up, you didn't fail. It's a setback. It's not failure.
Touche. Yeah, that's a good perspective to have. But I think most people don't see it that way. So what they see it as an easy out. Hey, I tried this. Steve, I did what you said. On Sunday, I went to the grocery store. I bought all the organic vegetables and fruits so that I know that I spent the money on them in advance and that I would eat them before they went bad. But guess what? Most of them went bad anyway. I was just too busy. I couldn't do it. This isn't for me. I'm going to stop. So people are almost looking for an out. So make it hard to fail. Part of that is, like you said, make it hard to fail, wherein that is not considered a failure. You not completing that task isn't a failure. It's a misstep at worst in this journey, but it's not a failure, because if you tell yourself that you failed, then you're just people are almost looking to fail out of these things to go back to normalcy, because the first few weeks are so hard, as you know, in building these habits. It's always everyone's different, but it's always those first 2, 3, 4 weeks where it's really hard to gain that momentum and to make those habits stick and make a more permanent change. So I think making these things, when you set yourself up to say, hey, that's why I always say, don't go 0 to 60, make these things easy. If you're writing out your meals or your workouts, let me stick to my expertise. If you're writing out your workouts for the week, and someone who just gets off the couch and goes, I'm going to start working out. I signed up for Planet Fitness. I'm going to go there. And these are my workouts. I'm going to do these Monday through Saturday. It's like, well, that's too much. You're going to fail. Or you're going to do your version of the fail, wherein you only make it two or three times. And then you feel like, is this even worth it? I didn't make it all these times. So just say, hey, I'm going to go twice this week. I'm going to give myself a little bit of flexibility when those 2 days can be. And I'm going to stay for at least 40 minutes. That's it, right? And then each week incrementally make things a little bit more difficult. But make it hard to fail means make it easy to succeed. Go in with the easiest thing, conquer that easiest thing, and then make it. People are always thinking about the long-term dream scenario, right? What is my body going to look like in whatever, next April, when I go on this diet and then I have to go to this cruise? That's great to maybe have that floating around somewhere in the background, but man, you can't think about that on a daily basis. You just have to grind and go through the process and make it easy to succeed and hard to fail.
For sure. I love that. I tell my clients, when it comes to, their goals, you want to scale it back and you want to break it down, right? So if my goal is to run 5 miles, okay, scale that back to 1 mile and then break it down. What do you have to do to get out the door and even run 1 mile in the morning, right? I have to get dressed. I have to feed the dog. I have to leave my shoes by the door, because you have to focus on small wins, right? So by that point, if you scale it back to 1 mile and you can get out the door, you can reflect on all the things you've accomplished to get there. And then having these small wins, again, is going to create a dopamine surge in your brain, and that's going to allow you to feel good. Feelings of success also help to wire in a habit. If you're feeling like your goals are too big and you're feeling like you failed, you're never going to be able to stick with it. So what I tell my clients is, go big or go home is not the answer for lifestyle changes, right? You're not going to do something overnight. I think that 75 hard program is terrible. I completely disagree with that. It's small, consistent changes. And again, working with a nutritionist, working with a trainer, they are going to encourage you to keep going. I think it's impossible to fail when you work with us, right? Because when someone does say, Steve, I wasn't able to get to the gym, or maybe I could only do three pull-ups today. Okay, well, you're going to encourage them and say, that's completely normal. Your body's sore. Next week, you're going to be able to do more. So I think when people do it alone, they are so much more likely to throw in the towel early, because they don't understand that it's not a linear path, right? It's not here to here. It kind of goes like that, until you reach your goal.
And that's why it's important to have a professional who understands the psycho approach to this game, because it's not just about the science. It's about analyzing the person and then developing a game plan. I have clients who chase that physiological high from exercise. And those are people who I have to sometimes kind of pull back and give them other things to do, because they have no problem working out. The problem is they go overboard and they torch their bodies. And every day they don't get that high unless they go do their workout. right? So like I then need to develop a different game plan for them to say, hey, we're gonna take a step back here. I know every day you think you need to wake up, you're almost addicted to like going to Orange Theory and doing these hit type things, but we're not actually getting to your goals because you're just burning a bunch of calories, getting the high in your brain, and then we're moving on. This is not going to reach your goals. We have to do this a different way, and vice versa. There's people who hate exercise, and you have to find the things that they will like. You have to talk to them and say, hey, what is it that you do like? What are things that you've done before, right? People's health history in nutrition matters about what you're going to give them now, right? What have they done in the past is really important for what diet they're going to give. Well, same thing in my world when I'm game planning. What have you done in the past? I find out that they love tennis. It's like, okay, well, let's start playing tennis again. Maybe we should reintroduce that into your health and fitness regimen, because I know that you like it. I know that you miss it. So it's something that you're more likely to do rather than me just introducing Olympic lifting. So it is important to work with professionals who look at you as the individual and come up with the proper game plan.
I love that. And I'm such a big proponent of that. If you come to me and tell me you hate kale and you hate smoothies, that's okay. Like, we can work around that, right? Like, what do you like? What are foods that you like? And I think you and I both really emphasize this when we start working with clients. What has worked for you in the past? What hasn't worked for you? What do you like? Because that's important. You're never going to stick with it. You're never going to stick with a diet that I give you if you don't tell me that you hate kale and I have kale Caesar salads on there. You have to enjoy it in order for it to be a long-term solution. And so again, that's why I think having a personalized plan and working with a team to come up with customized solutions that work for you and your lifestyle and your preferences is so important.
Remind listeners where they can find everything about you and your business, from the habits to the nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram, Happy Healthy Nutritionist, and my website, happyhealthynutritionist.com. All sorts of free guides there and information about my course.
As a reminder, the Trulyfit Podcast is on YouTube, and it is on every listening platform possible. So if you're listening now rather than watching, just know that you can watch these podcasts. This has been an episode of the Trulyfit Podcast. Rebecca, thank you for joining in.
Thanks.